Hey everybody, this is Brett. Welcome back to School Sucks Live. Waiting for your calls, 843, join SSP, Skype in School Sucks Live. With me in the studio tonight, Cory and Osborne. We are talking about psychopathy. We're talking about a documentary film that deals with psychopathy called I Am Fishead.
Yes.
And right now, we are trying to give a more complete, not so Hollywoody picture of what psychopathy is all about. So Cory is going through Robert Hare's checklist.
Yes. We are on Factor 2, case history. The last one we read was the need for stimulation, a proneness to boredom. Next comes parasitic lifestyle.
Come on, did he write this? Is this like some kind of a political commentary?
No, I don't think it was intended to be.
Oh.
He's an academic. So
Yeah,
as Osborne has rightly pointed out,
Yeah.
that his paycheck comes from the government, so he can't be too critical of them directly.
Most likely, it might not.
It might not be, but still.
Right.
Anyhow, parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioral control. We see a lot of examples of that in the news. This might be the very best one. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Impulsivity, irresponsibility, juvenile delinquency, early behavior problems, revocation of conditional release, which I guess has to do with getting released from prison or a mental hospital.
Okay.
And then behaving in such a way that they make you come back.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are traits that are not necessarily correlated to either one of these factors and can show up either way, including promiscuous sexual behavior, many short-term marital relationships.
Sure.
Okay. Criminal versatility, which is one of my new favorite phrases.
Let's elaborate on that real quick. Criminal versatility. What do you take that to mean?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine it has to do with, just being able to mold yourself and fit into any sort of criminal enterprise you might want to get involved in. Just because you're that flexible.
I think another thing about the psychopath is they're very much like, to go back to our animal friends, they're like the shark moving forward.
Yeah.
They're always looking for new prey.
It's not actually true, about sharks having to constantly move.
But I'm saying the shark moving forward looking for prey. The shark might stop, he might go backward in real life, but in this case, looking for prey,
right.
He moves forward.
Right.
So they're on the hunt.
Or sometimes up.
Sure.
Sorry, I'll stop doing that.
Like in that movie where he ate all those folks.
Or the one where the giant one jumped out of the ocean and grabbed a passenger plane that was flying overhead.
Yep.
The mega shark. Anyways.
On our show, we also talk about movies directed by Steven Spielberg and sometimes other people. But so the shark moving forward, always looking for new prey, and that might not always be just the predator on the hunt. It might be, because one of the things that I saw, and maybe we're coming to it on this list, is a quest for novelty.
Right.
Right? That nothing is, the boredom that you already mentioned, nothing is satisfying long term. So they talk about, going from one victim to another.
Well, there's also, speaking of sharks, there's ample evidence that sharks will literally eat anything they can fit in their mouth and or bite into mouth-fitting pieces. They don't really, they do have preferred prey, which is the easier prey to get, but they've fished up sharks and cut them open and found license plates in their stomachs and stuff like that. Like stuff that, why would he eat that? Who knows?
But in this case, it's usually more about power or money, even though, like those license plates that the sharks eat, you don't need that.
Right.
It has no nutrients. It has no benefit for you to have more power and more money, but there's like some kind of compulsion or obsession to keep going because you need that novelty. I think a lot of people, now, you don't have to admit to this at home. You don't have to call in and say, wow, that really... I know what you mean, and that happens to me all the time. Mm-hmm. On one after show recently, we were talking about that website, Your Brain on Porn.
Okay.
And how sometimes people's porn habits sabotage their sexual relationships, right? Because you can't be tapping on your girlfriend and saying, I'm ready for, Asian interracial gangbang in a college setting,
right?
And immediately have that, right? So that kind of,
unless you're really lucky,
it rarely happens.
No, yeah, rarely.
But that kind of novelty keeps driving people forward compulsively, even when they're not even horny. They're not even needing to pleasure themselves. So that's not psychopathic, but I think it's a way, from what I remember reading in Your Brain on Porn, it's that kind of a behavior. There's no real motive. And I think psychopaths do, on the other hand, tell themselves stories about legacy and ambition and having some kind of destiny, but that's not always motivating their quest for victims.
Well, I think that also tunes into the grandiose sense of self-worth that we talked about. It doesn't matter if I need it, I deserve to have it, and I'm taking it, you know?
Right.
Because they think that just based on the wonderfulness of who they are, that they deserve to have it.
Sure. So what do we get next?
Okay, we criminal versatility, we said, right?
Yep.
Acquired behavioral sociopathy or sociological conditioning, which is really vague.
So would that be
a newly identified trait, i.e. a person relying on sociological strategies and tricks to deceive. So the use of actual learned, practiced, faked sociological methods of interacting with people.
So in the film, he was talking about one psychologist, I believe, who was brought in to consult on this Nicole Kidman film, Malice.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Where she has to play that psychopath.
Right. And she said, you have to describe to me a scene from this psychopath's life that someone else might not have seen, a scene that's, not written into the film.
Right.
So he said, what was the scene he laid out for her? You're walking down the street, you see a child laying in the street who's been hit by a car, and the child's mother is there and going through all the emotions and expressing all the emotions that you expect a mother to receive when their child just been hit by a car. And you, as the psychopath, instead of looking at the child and thinking about how horrible this all is and turning away in disgust, you study the mother. You watch her face, and then you turn around and you walk dispassionately away, go home, stand in front of a mirror, and practice mimicking all those facial expressions the mother made.
Right.
So that if you need to pull that out of your bag of tricks to fake, overwhelming grief at some point, you know what faces to make.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing I think they mean, yeah.
So years ago in my career, I worked with young people, and a couple of them were said to have Asperger's syndrome.
Right.
Right. Which is a mild form of autism where they are just not in tune or able to process or understand, in many cases, their own emotions, but certainly the emotions of other people.
Right.
Which ultimately translates, even though, it's not their fault, of course, an absence of empathy.
Right.
So they, like the psychopath, are unable to do this. But the psychopath, being more predatory, understands that they have to kind of put on this mask and fake it.
Yes.
So, and you were saying too, how I think you were watching, what was it called, with Morgan Freeman, wonderful show.
Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman.
And
I keep turning the microphone away.
I felt like we had a story that related to that.
Oh, well, was it about the professor? The neurologist who was a professor. I spent all afternoon trying to track down this guy's name, and I could not find it because I deleted the episode from my DVR. But he was a neurologist at an Ivy League university doing research on psychopathy, and this is something they touched on in this movie as well. They, just showing how the brain scan of a psychopath compared to that of a regular person, their brain responds to stimuli in a totally different way than we do. So there is actually something you can look at, the activity in a person's brain, to determine whether they're a psychopath. And he did a scan of his own brain. This accomplished Ivy League professor did a scan of his own brain and found that his brain worked exactly like a psychopath's brain worked, which led him to the conclusion that, yes, as it turns out, I'm a psychopath.
And weren't there other neurological studies also mentioned in that show? Or maybe it wasn't that show, but I'm remembering something where conscience could be activated and deactivated.
Oh, right. That it's not so much that a psychopath lacks empathy, that their empathy, aren't capable of it. They are utterly capable of empathy, and in fact, those same brain scans we were talking about, when exposed to things that would inspire empathy in a regular person, the part of their brain part of the brain that controls empathy responds just the same way as everybody else's brain does, but it's under their conscious control, and they can turn it off or on as needed to interact with people.
Interesting. Folks, in hour 2, we'd love to take calls from you. We are going to be discussing how an entire society becomes psychopathic, and more movie talk. We've got one big movie on this topic that we haven't gotten to yet. This is School Sucks Live. We'll be back.
A congressman recently